We are now joined by former CIA Director John Brennan. This is his first reaction since learning today that his security clearance has been stripped by President Donald Trump. Director Brennan, thank you for joining us. Just your first reaction.
Well, Nicole, I just pushed out a tweet expressing my concern about what I think is a politically motivated action by Mr. Trump. And
Let me read that, Director. Let me read it. Let me read it for all of our viewers and anyone in their car who can't see that we put it up on the screen. You just tweeted, "This action is part of a broader effort by Mr. Trump to suppress freedom of speech and punish critics. It should gravely worry all Americans, including intelligence professionals, about the cost of speaking out. My principles are worth far more than clearances. I will not relent."
Yeah, and that basically is the essence of my reaction. I do believe that Mr. Trump decided to take this action, as he's done with others, to try to intimidate and suppress any criticism of him or his administration. And revoking my security clearances is his way of trying to get back at me. But I think I have tried to voice the concerns of millions of Americans about Mr. Trump's failures in terms of fulfilling the responsibilities of that sacred and solemn office of the presidency. And this is not going to deter me at all. I'm going to continue to speak out. But I am very worried about the message that it appears that Mr. Trump is trying to send to others, and including those that currently hold security clearances within the government. I think he included Bruce Orr, a current Department of Justice official, among those whose clearances he's reviewing. Is this an effort to try to cow individuals, both inside and outside of the government, to make sure that they don't say anything either that is critical of Mr. Trump or with which he disagrees? And I've seen this type of behavior and actions on the part of foreign tyrants and despots and autocrats for many, many years during my CIA and national security career. I never, ever thought that I would see it here in the United States. And so I do believe that all Americans really need to take stock of what is happening right now in our government and how abnormal and how irresponsible and how dangerous these actions are. So, again, if Mr. Trump believes that this is going to lead me to just go away and be quiet, he is very badly mistaken.
Let me ask you an uncomfortable question. The president today described your conduct as erratic. They said this is a retaliation for erratic conduct and behavior. He is trying to diminish your credibility. What do you know that you haven't shared yet that he would want to take your credibility down a notch? You are highly regarded by Democrats and Republicans, but it seems like as he's done with Jim Comey, as he's done with Robert Mueller, your credibility is something he sees as important to diminish. What do you know that he's afraid of?
Well, I think he is concerned about the criticisms that I'm voicing publicly. I think he fears those types of criticisms. I think he fears individuals who could damage him, could damage his standing among the American people. I mean, look at the way he's been referring to Bob Mueller. Bob Mueller, who is a national treasure, an icon within the law enforcement and justice communities, who's doing his level best to investigate Russian interference in the election. And the denigration of Bob Mueller, as well as his team of investigators, is reprehensible. It really is. And so I think when I speak out about some of his practices and his what I think are flawed policies. Now, we can all have policy disagreements and differences. That's what makes this country great. But I must tell you that Mr. Trump's dishonesty, his lack of integrity, his nastiness, mean-spiritedness, the types of things that he has just tweeted out over the past 72 hours, the terms that he uses, this is not what I think of an American president, nor of America. We're better than this. We have to be better than this. And we have been a shining example to the world, and Mr. Trump is letting this country down.
Do you believe he's motivated by a desire to please someone other than the American public? And by that, we've had a lot of conversations about his relationship with Vladimir Putin. After Helsinki, even some of his closest allies, and I understand even some members of the White House staff, started to scratch their head and wonder if, maybe there is something there. Do you think his conduct in office, the fact that he is almost to an item, to a to-do list, carrying out Vladimir Putin's wishes for the American democracy, the divisions, the polarization, the pro-Russia policies, and the disparagement of our longest, closest, and most trusted allies. Do you think there's something more going on than incompetence and debasing the office of the presidency?
Well, he may very well have a guilty conscience about the types of things that he has done in the past. I don't know. He is the one who has to account for those previous actions and whether or not those actions ran afoul of ethics and of the law. And I don't know what he may be concerned about in terms of what might be divulged as part of this investigation or others. But as I have said repeatedly, I find his attitude and behavior toward Vladimir Putin and the Russians very, very puzzling and very, very irrational. And so I don't know what it is that is behind that. But I think that's why it's critically important that Bob Mueller and his team of investigators be allowed to continue their work unimpeded by Mr. Trump or anyone else in the administration. It's important that Rod Rosenstein stays in charge of that investigation from a Department of Justice oversight perspective. But clearly, I think Mr. Trump is getting more and more concerned, more and more desperate, I would say more and more frightened, as there is closer and closer magnification of some of the things that those around him have been involved in, those who may have been concealing illegal activities, as has been admitted by a number of individuals that were associated with the Trump campaign. So I do think it's important that I continue to speak out. I know some things that the Russians were involved in, but I certainly don't know all the things that Mr. Trump has been involved in over the years, and I do not pretend to have that knowledge. He is the one, but clearly his actions are those of somebody who is seeking to prevent the full light of day being shown upon his past.
You've talked about a guilty conscience, and you've talked about the importance of Robert Mueller being able to complete his work. You must know that Robert Mueller is perhaps the most frequent punching bag from this president in his Twitter feed. I wonder if you could, having some familiarity with how Bob Mueller runs an investigation and how he thinks about prosecutions and investigations. I wonder if you think that the president is at this point a target in the obstruction of justice investigation or the conspiracy investigation around collusion with Russia, and if you think that that's a semantic game at this point, if you think that it's the fact that perhaps Mueller is adhering to Justice Department policy, which says you can't indict a sitting president. Do you think but for that, the president is a target of the obstruction investigation or the collusion investigation?
I have no knowledge about what Bob Mueller and his team have uncovered and what they are pursuing. But what I do know about Bob Mueller and those investigators is that they are exceptionally thorough, exceptionally meticulous, and will continue to look for any evidence of criminal wrongdoing, whether that was to conspire with foreign governments against this country, whether it was to defraud this country as a result of financial transactions that were hidden, or obstruction of justice. And over the last year plus, when Bob Mueller has been involved in this effort, and the previous year where the FBI was investigating Russian interference, I am confident that they have looked at all of these different angles, and I know that Bob Mueller is not going to give anyone a pass in terms of any type of criminal conduct that might have been uncovered. So, again, I have no knowledge about what's in the status of that investigation, but I just know that the quality of Bob Mueller and his team is one that all Americans should be proud of. And all Americans, whether they support Mr. Trump or not, should want this investigation to be brought to completion. And so that we can, once and for all, resolve some of these questions that are outstanding about what happened during this period of time, what the Russians were involved with doing, and who they might have been working with. I think at the end of the day, we all should accept the findings of that special investigative team. And if they exonerate everybody, including Mr. Trump, from any wrongdoing whatsoever, we should accept that, because that is what the rule of law demands. That's what our system of justice requires. But I have been very, very disheartened and disappointed that Mr. Trump and others have tried to throw obstacles in the path of this investigation from its very earliest days. That is something that should not happen.
And I'm guessing if they thought it would exonerate them, they would have agreed to an interview, which 70% of Americans believe this president should do. That obviously includes a lot of his own supporters. Can I ask you about where you go from here? Have you heard today from CIA Director Gina Haspel about the stripping of your clearance, or DNI Coates, who we understand from Andrea Mitchell's reporting were not in the loop on the president's decision to strip you of your clearances?
No, I was called by a friend and associate when Sarah Huckabee Sanders was giving that statement. So I had no knowledge of it beforehand. No one contacted me. Nobody reached out to me over the past several weeks when this issue was had first surfaced. So the first I heard about it was when I was able to turn on the television and listen to Ms. Sanders. And I have not heard anything from any government official since then or before then. So I'm just watching the news, and I'm so glad that you and other members of the Fourth Estate are carrying out your responsibilities to report information to the American people.
General Hayden has said that Donald Trump has been engaged in an assault on evidence-based practices, the intelligence community, the law enforcement community, the media, and science. What do you think happens to the people inside the government who rely on evidence, intelligence gathered about the ongoing threat posed by Russia, information that they need to bring to the president, but we've already seen he has a penchant for leaking to Russians? What happens to the people inside government who can't have the conversation you and I are having right now?
Well, it's a very good question. And when I was in government, I served for 6 presidents, 3 Republicans and 3 Democrats. And I don't think there was ever a time that any intelligence or law enforcement or national professional questioned whether the president of the United States was taking their information seriously. They might have disagreed with the conclusions. They might have decided to go on certain policy courses. But they never had a sense that the president was either dismissive or had this rather disdainful attitude toward their professions. Now, though, the situation is much different. I think Mr. Trump has shown himself to be somebody who is first and foremost concerned about himself and is concerned about how he appears and his poll numbers and other things, and is not taking the U.S. national security and our domestic comity and our ability to get along as the guiding principles of his job. And that is, I think, something that I know, dispiriting to a lot of professionals who sacrifice a lot, and their families who sacrifice a lot when they have to be deployed overseas, and the family members are the ones who have to keep the home fires burning. I get so upset when I hear Mr. Trump denigrate the work of national security and intelligence professionals when I know that they have a very, very challenging job in juggling their professional responsibilities along with their personal responsibilities. So this is, I think, a sad time. We will come out from it under it. I am very confident in the resilience of this and the strength of this nation. Mr. Trump is not going to bring this country down. I think, in fact, the opposite will happen.
One of the reasons people like you keep your clearances is because you've been involved in every national security threat facing this country for the duration of your career, as have the other people that he listed as targets on his enemies list for the same punishment you received today. Do you believe it endangers America's national security if there's this brain drain, if people who were involved in making plans to capture bin Laden are stripped of their clearances, they're not able to be a resource for the current administration?
Well, security clearances are certainly a privilege. I don't consider it a right. And I think all of us who had to go through the security clearance process had to demonstrate that we were worthy of holding this nation's secrets and keeping and preserving them. And so I am concerned that if security clearances are now going to become a political tool in the hands of individuals such as Mr. Trump, that I think will send a very, very chilling message to individuals in the government currently, maybe former officials who still hold their clearances, as well as the future generation of intelligence and security professionals. So I am very concerned about the principle here. I'm very concerned about what this might portend in terms of the revocation of other clearances. And this is something that I believe that the press needs to shine a very bright spotlight on, to make sure that this abuse, and that's what I consider it, an abuse of power by Mr. Trump, does not go without a very close review and challenge.
Just real quick, is there anything you can do to appeal this decision today? Is there a process for appealing the stripping of your clearances?
Well, I don't know, Nicole, and right now I'm still absorbing the announcement, and it's not going to affect my speaking out and my criticisms of Mr. Trump. I'm going to try to do it in a professional way. But I don't know what recourse there is, and so I'll just take things one day at a time.
Thank you for absorbing it live on our air. We are very grateful to have you on All Days, especially today.